Big cats in overall body form. They had their own shit going on. And as far as I understand for now, they are accepted to the Mecharodon lineage as simply an experimental offshoot with a different degree of belatedness in their teeth, if that makes sense. I'm going to introduce you to some of the most notable species
I'm
in
gonna
this
let you go.
lineage, starting from earliest and going to latest. We're going to do that for each.
Yeah.
Earliest to latest.
I'm streaming.
Earliest.
And you're
Yoshi.
picking up on my microphone.
That's its scientific name. Its fragmented remains were first found in Greece back in the 1930s, and it danced around.
But I also have a video going, so then and then I'm talking, and then that's gonna be
scientists connected other remains found in China
an overstimulating nightmare.
Name assigned all these remains to Metailerus, cat we'll get to in a second. But then in 2014, a Bulgarian paleontologist named Nikolai Spasov and his colleagues said, "Fuck all that. Some of these remains are not Metailerus. This isn't a cat." And they gave it the genus name Yoshi after Nikolai's pet cat. Is that not the best? And it literally says that in the paper. Look, etymology. Yoshi is the name of the favorite cat of one of us. That's fucking cute. Yoshi was a lynx to cheetah-sized cat with a short, wide skull and upper canines.
Jack, I swear to fucking God.
And not serrated. They were alive during the late Miocene, so sometime between 9 to 5 million years ago. Their build suggests they were active hunters in open environments, using bursts of speed and powerful leaps. And the skull is especially cheetah-like. They have a sloping face and elevated eye sockets.
Okay, I love you, but I'm gonna go.
To cheetahs alive today. But it seems as though they were leapers more than sprinters. A leaping cheetah face, slightly saber-toothed cat named Yoshi. It doesn't get any better than that. All right,
Jack, calm down.
Hey, Liz,
Jack, calm down. Jack, calm down.
They
No.
are the namesake of the tribe.
Okay.
The tribe was named after them. They were first described from fossils found in China in 1924. Then, later, they were found across Europe as well. From my understanding, these are separate from the remains that are now called Yoshi. There is Yoshi in Europe and also Metailerus in Europe. Valid. But if I'm wrong about that, let me know. The earliest fossils date to about 8 million years ago, but they were around for a very long time, this genus as a whole, until like 100,000 years ago. By the way, that's like 4 times as long as our genus. Homo. Long time. They had slightly longer upper canines, were puma to snow leopard size. Oh my God.
Definitely part of that genus.
I need to get over this. I get stage fright. I don't want anybody to see me filming. That's Metailerus. I'm moving on. I got thrown off. That's all I really had to say anyway. The most successful and best known Metailerine is Dinofelis, another confusing cat that was first described in 1924 from China. Historically, they've been placed all over the cat family tree, in every little pocket of the tree that you can imagine, but has landed in Metailerini, at least for now. Dinofelis is often called a false saber-toothed cat because its canines were pretty short and only moderately flecked, but they had a build robust and not adapted for speed, which is like what Mecharodons had going on as a whole. They were probably ambush predators in forests and woodlands. And they existed for a pretty long time too, like 7.5 to 1 million years ago. And their fossils have been found in Europe, Asia, Africa, and North America. They're like the Homo erectus of the Metailerines, all over the place.
Erectus.
Well, I guess not, because they're all extinct now. But a million years ago, they weren't. So,
I'm too mature
what I was
for.
trying to say. And speaking of hominids, as they keep coming up, there's actual
Whatever
fossil
the fuck
evidence
this
that
is.
Dinofelis was tearing their shit up on very rare occasions.
The study
Very
of.
rare, but on occasion nonetheless. There's some remains in South Africa of both
Man, I don't know.
Dinofelis and Paranthropus, or the robust hominids. And some of the Paranthropus skulls have perfectly sized Dinofelis teeth holes in it, but analysis of isotopes in the teeth of Dinofelis suggests this was not usual. They were thought to be hominid hunters for a while. Turns out that's not the case. I know that would have been interesting, but they ate them occasionally. You can, I guess, say that for anything. All right, we're moving on to the next tribe on our list, Mecharodontini, the old-fashioned made in a St. Bernard's barrel. They were all about endurance. They traded brute strength, the other tribes are known for speed and stamina instead. They were the cheetah girls. They had slender bills and shorter, serrated scimitar teeth. These are the scimitar-toothed cats. Dominated ecosystems across 5 continents and existed for like 12 million years, at least. We're gonna start off with Mecharodus. Yes, the Mecharodon in tribe Mecharodontini, named Mecharodus. They're the namesake of all of it. So that means when scientists first described and grouped saber-toothed cats, Mecharodus was a key example they used to set the standard for the whole subfamily and tribe. Mecharodus got a little bit bigger than modern lions, about 4 feet tall at the shoulder, like here. And as time went on, species became more elongated in forelimbs, flattened in the canines, and cheek teeth. And they developed those finer serrations on the edges of their teeth. They were one of the earliest members of this tribe, first appearing in Eurasia about 12 million years ago, maybe a little earlier. Shit is muddy. And eventually spread to Africa and North America. Much later on, in North America about 2.5 million years ago, existed Xenosmilus, also known as the cookie cutter cat. Yeah, you bitches are gonna love this one. Fossil evidence suggests that rather than slicing or stripping meat, they used all of their teeth to tear out circular chunks of flesh. Cookies. You know who else does this, by the way? The cookie cutter shark. Knowing you, and I feel like I know you pretty well, I'm gonna guess you are into cookie cutter animals, especially a cat and a shark version. You're welcome. Their placement in the cat tree was, once again, you guessed it, muddy as fuck for a while. They had a weird mix of traits. They had the stocky build of more of your Smilodon type forms, but the serrated blades of a scimitar-toothed cat. They had their own shit going on. All of them did. Never expected to classify it, but here we are now measuring their bones. They never expected that to happen. They never knew they'd be called the shit that we're calling them, you know? All this is only for us. It's all for our benefit. Like, to them, they were not the oddballs of the Macarodon teeny tribe. They were just chilling. This means nothing to them. But what did matter to them, they were likely ambush hunters in woodland forests. And you know what? That's all that mattered to them. Maybe a lovely sunset mattered occasionally as well. And the last Macarodon team on the list, Homotheria. Actually, this tribe is sometimes called Homotherini, by the way. But anyway, if you've watched my channel before or also do not live under a rock, you're probably familiar with Homotherium at least a little bit, and at least recently, because just last year, like 6 months ago, a 3-week-old Homotherium cub, well,
oh, I did see
6 months ago. It was announced 6 months ago. A 3-week-old Homotherium cub was found frozen in ice in Russia. It was announced 6 months ago. Found a few years ago. It's about 36,000 years old and is the first time an animal with no living relatives has been found fully preserved in ice. Because yeah, they are cats, but the saber-toothed cats split from the conical-toothed cats at the very least 10 million years ago. Probably more like 15 or 20. Definitely more like 20. Homotherium was first described in 1846 from teeth found in the British cave of Kent's Cavern. It seemed as though an early human had carried the teeth inside, so they couldn't figure out a solid time period at the time. But since then, Homotherium remains have been found in other parts of Europe, Asia, North America, Africa, and even South America, which is fucking all of them, except for the ones that don't matter. Australia and Antarctica. Just kidding, they matter. That was a mean joke. Making them the most widespread genus of the tribe that we know of, with serrated scimitar teeth, elongated limbs for endurance runting, and now, on to the final branch of the Macarodon lineage. The most extreme, the most iconic, Smilodon teeny. Home to the famous Smilodon, also known as Diego, the saber-toothed tiger.
Diego!
Think of when you hear saber-toothed cat. Massive, saber canines, bulky bodies like a linebacker, and powerful forelimbs that make them excellent ambush predators. The fact I don't have it in here already is ridiculous. I have it in my living room to show off to my guests, but I wonder if I can just I have a little table right here as a little corner piece right there. Is this stupid? Is this dumb? Yeah, that's it. This is it compared to my head. One thing I haven't talked about yet is saber-toothed tiger, the common name. You've heard it before. It's technically incorrect. And obviously, they were not tigers. They were in a whole different branch. It's more correct to just call them a saber-toothed cat, since that's what they are. Saber-toothed tigers suggest they were tigers, but they were not. But what is a common name, really? You know, I get correcting it because you don't want people to think they were tigers with saber teeth. I have definitely corrected people on it before, but I kind of feel like looking back on those times with the venom that I corrected them in, it was just gross behavior, I guess. I don't know, because it's a common name, you know? I feel like my mind has changed. Maybe it's just today that I feel different about this, but who gives a shit if people call it a saber-toothed tiger? Who's that gonna affect if they call an extinct animal a saber-toothed tiger instead of a saber-toothed cat? Who does it affect? Common names are common names for a reason. Sometimes you have to pick your battles. Does it really matter? I don't know. Exhibit A, when someone sees a slippery dick. Stop! The fish. Do you feel the need to say it's not technically a dick? No. That's a bad example. It's obviously a fish. The saber-toothed tiger is obviously not a tiger. There's probably a million other examples of this. I just can't think of them because that was just a horrific example. But you get what I'm saying. Let's move to another sidebar on another thing I forgot to mention earlier on. If you're familiar with saber-toothed cats, you might have seen some scientists recently suggest that they didn't have their sabers exposed. Hey, I can show it. Instead, that they were covered with skin for protection or to avoid damage. This changes the vibe dramatically, but it's a lot more complex than covered in skin or no skin. Like anything in nature, seems to have existed on a gradient. Some species had exposed canines, others didn't. I also want to say, I mean flaps, not skin on the teeth. I mean flaps. Early scimitar-toothed cats like Homotherium might have had partially concealed upper canines, so maybe right here when their mouths were closed. I can't close this, by the way. That would be cool. Fossil reconstruction suggests flexible lips covered the base of their shorter serrated teeth, similar to modern lions, which reduced wear and aligned with their endurance-based hunting style, where slashing tendons or stripping flesh required durability. over precision. But then extreme saber teeth, like this, probably had very exposed canines all the time, like this. This helped to create rapid, precise throat bites to immobilize large prey quickly. Critical for an ambush predator, reliant on power over stamina, which is what Smilodontini had going on as a whole. Different groups experimented with different things based on their slightly different lifestyles, as you expect in nature. I'm gonna move this because this is a little distracting. The story of Smilodontini starts with a puma-sized cat called Promeganterion. Is that how you pronounce it? Promeganterion. Promeganterion, alive in the late Miocene in Europe, like 9 to 7 million years ago. Already this early on, this cat showed some of the signature saber-tooth adaptations. Powerful forelimbs and longer, flattened canines. They also had features like neck bones with bigger side projections for muscle attachment, i.e. enlarged transverse processes. This is kind of a transition between the ancestral cats and the saber cats. Made the neck stronger, more stable for grappling prey. Next, Meganetherium, alive more recently, like 4 million years ago to about 600,000 years ago, roughly. The oldest confirmed remains are from Kenya, date to 3.5 million years ago, but there's some unconfirmed remains that are a little over 4 million years old. And, as you would expect, most of their remains are pretty fragmented. Once again, muddy as fuck. What we definitely do know is they were all over the place, across Eurasia, Africa, in North America. So because of this, they're kind of like a pseudailurus situation where there's about a dozen species that have been proposed for different fossils found in different places, but only 2 are actually confirmed, at least for now. One of those species might be the ancestor to the rest. But who really knows for certain? Meganetherium's elusive remains suggest a cat that got to about the size of a lion, but more powerfully built, like their Smilodontini brethren. They're considered a transitional form between earlier saber-toothed cats with more concealed canines and the later Smilodon types that had exposed as fuck. Some scientists have even suggested Meganetherium is the direct ancestor of Smilodon, but this is not confirmed. Other people see them as the sister groups, sisters rather than mama and baby. And now, I must leave you on another cliffhanger, I know, because I'm saving Smilodon for its own video, which is already filmed. Don't worry, it'll be out in a week. You might know I started another series, Extinct, where I get some of my favorite extinct animals tattooed on me. Probably not gonna surprise you that Smilodon is episode 2. That's right, bitch, we already got a crossover episode. So I'm gonna talk about Smilodon more in depth there while I get it tattooed, and I already have it done. And I could show you right now, but I won't. If you haven't watched my first episode on Diabloceratops, check that out in the meantime. And subscribe, so you don't miss the most iconic chapter of the Mecharodont lineage, getting permanently put onto my skin. Each episode was supposed to be a surprise, but I'm sure you're not shocked at all that this is the next episode. So the surprise will be the placement. Placement is sick. It's really sick. Check out my Patreon for behind-the-scenes updates, live streams, and our Discord server. And for now, stay curious. The world has a lot for us to learn. See ya! In the last few years, there's been a growing internet conspiracy that scientists have T-Rex all wrong. Rather than the tiny arms that have been recovered in fossil evidence since the early 1900s, they say T-Rex instead had wings. They came to this conclusion by looking at the skeleton of a T-Rex and comparing it to the skeleton of an ostrich. Pictures, by the way. Pictures of these skeletons. And what started as a popular comment under a conspiracy Reddit thread has turned into a genuine belief of thousands, if not millions of people on mostly TikTok that not only this is true, but scientists have confirmed it, which, spoiler alert, they did not. Not a single scientist has ever said that. This conspiracy is complete garbage, but I guess I can understand where things went downhill. At first glance, T-Rex's arms are disrespectful. Pipsqueaks, they're attached to what's considered one of the most successful predators to ever exist, and they just look like useless sticks. I understand the confusion, the dismay, but there are plenty of legitimate explanations for them, and none of them include wings. So today we're going to run through all of this. I'll explain how this conspiracy started, why it's absolutely false, and the real explanations as to why T-Rex had such disrespectful arms. My name is Lindsay Nicole, and this is another episode of Junkspiracies. The T-Rex did not have wings. As always, we're going to get the general information out of the way. T-Rex is badass. Their name, Tyrannosaurus Rex, translates to King of the Tyrant Lizards, which goes harder than any Targaryen name ever in the history of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. And that is a compliment. I love Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. The season finale sucked. I wanted more warfare, but I'll give them a pass this time. T-Rex belongs to a larger group of dinosaurs called theropods, which includes some other well-known dinosaurs you're probably familiar with, like Velociraptor, Spinosaurus, Therizinosaurus, that classic kangaroo stance.
God
this group also
damn it.
includes
Wrong
birds,
layer again.
which I think has created some confusion, but we'll get to that in a bit. T-Rex were not birds in the same way humans are not squirrels. But we'll get to that in a bit. Because T-Rex is the icon that it is, a lot of money has been poured into learning more about them by analyzing the bones. So, here's a variety of facts. Some that are more basic, others that are more, like what the fuck. So, T-Rex was up to 12 feet tall and 40 feet long, which is 4 times the length of my room. That makes me want to throw up. They had 60 serrated teeth, which could each get to 8 inches long. This was definitely not a little guy. They were found throughout what is now Western North America, which at the time was an island continent called Laramidia. Research done in 2019 found that T-Rex had one of the best senses of smell out of all dinosaurs that we know of. Analysis of growth rings in the bones in 2020 found that they had massive growth spurts as teenagers, possibly gaining 35 to 45 pounds per week. By analyzing the relationship between population density and body mass in living species, scientists in 2021 estimated that at any given time during their existence, there were about 20,000 T-Rex individuals in North America, and somewhere around 2 billion individuals total during their entire existence. Some pretty solid stats, if you ask me. And I decided I'm gonna stop there, because I know what you're here for, and I'm here for that as well. A good old-fashioned debunk. So, let's just go straight into the origin of this T-Rex wings conspiracy. Most people have only seen it on TikTok in the last 2 or 3 years. But the earliest instance I could find of it was in a Reddit thread from 6 years ago. It's a reply under r/AskReddit. The original question for the thread was, which conspiracy theory is so believable that it might be true? A user called Demonic Penguin said, and I'm just gonna read the whole thing. The arms on Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons are backwards. They ought to be rotated 180 degrees. What good are these stubby little arms for? We have found out relatively recently that T-Rex had feathers. It is now an established fact. T-Rex were not covered in scales, but in feathers, like a bird. Take the arms on a T-Rex and flip them around 180 degrees. You now have wings like an ostrich. Here's an illustration of an ostrich skeleton. See the small arms? Wings. Now look at a Tyrannosaurus. We used to think of almost all dinosaurs as lizard-like. In fact, the name means terrible lizard. Now we know that many different animals that we think of as dinosaurs are more bird-like than lizard-like. XKCD comic below illustrates this nicely. Tyrannosaurus Rex had wings. Not big wings to fly with, but wings that were perhaps something like that of an ostrich, cassowary, or emu, although likely much smaller in proportion to their body. Ostriches use their wings in mating rituals to make themselves appear larger, and to signal and communicate. Perhaps T-Rex used theirs for some similar purpose. They did not have useless, stubby little arms. So, let's just absorb all of that for a second. Right off the bat, this is obvious junk. Where do we even begin? I think I can separate it into 4 main problems to work through. That's what the debunk is going to be, 4 main sections. But before we get into those, I want to make sure we're all on the same page of what this idea has turned into in an existential context. So I want to say in like 2021-ish, I first saw this idea on TikTok. It was this video. It got a shit ton of views, so I debunked it. At the same time, there were a couple other videos going around like that did really well that some of my mutuals debunked. Problem solved? Obviously not. Like every TikTok conspiracy, this was only the beginning. TikTok conspiracies have a very predictable lifespan, or evolution if you will. A clickbait channel grabs an idea from somewhere else on the internet. They make a video about it, usually trying to pass off the ideas as their own. They throw this sound on it, the one that's playing right now, and boom, the video does well. Other clickbait channels come across this video and remake it, so they can go viral too. Science channels debunk them, and it kind of goes like this in a circle for a few weeks until it disappears out of relevance. Then, 6 months to a year later, the conspiracy reappears. It has been recycled with a twist. This time, it feels more legitimate. Some people are coming across the conspiracy for a second time. They remember it from the first time it went viral. It's been talked about before, on a massive scale. To the viewer's mind, these ideas have already been around. And I think what happens is, those viral videos from the previous phase get kind of internalized as a legitimacy, because the debunks don't always show up on the same viewers for you page. Usually they don't. So then when the conspiracy comes around a second time, months or a year later, the attitude is, yeah, I've already heard this before, old news, next. And very quickly, this evolves into comments like, scientists have confirmed that this is true, which I swear to God, dude, I get a comment like that every single time I talk about T-Rex. This has even showed up on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Maybe at one point I'd heard that there's one scientist thought those were like remnants of wings.
Oh, that makes sense.
And they weren't actually maybe arms, but they were wings.
Well, that totally makes sense when you think about like ostriches and shit like that they used to have wings and they turned into those things. Let me see it again. Let me see his fucking little shitty arms. That makes way more sense. That makes way more sense. They're the remnants of four wings.
We gotta stop there for a second, because this clip has also made its rounds on TikTok. Let's fast forward to that screenshot of the Nat Geo article.
One scientist thought those were like remnants of wings.
That's not what they're saying. Let's go to the original article, talking about the purpose of T-Rex's tiny arms. And it says, and I quote, "Whatever their limited use, the consensus in recent years seemed to be that they were vestigial, hanging around as an evolutionary remnant from T-Rex's ancestors. A little like the wings of flightless birds." So, not saying they're the remnants of wings of flightless birds at all. Saying they're vestigial, so smaller and less significant than they were for their ancestors, because they lost their purpose over time. One thing. And then comparing that to another example of a vestigial trait. A separate one, the wings of flightless birds. Other examples of vestigial traits, the legs of boas, our appendix, the fact that I can wiggle my ears. The wings of flightless birds are a vestigial trait because flightless birds evolved from flying birds. And so they have wings, but they're not as useful as they were to their ancestors who flew. That's a separate thing. T-Rex did not evolve from flightless birds at all, but we'll get to that in a minute. Was it the best comparison to make for T-Rex arms as a vestigial trait? No, not in this timeline. Maybe the legs of snakes would have been better, but this junk was probably not on Nat Geo's radar. It's pretty obvious that this conversation wasn't necessarily supposed to be taken seriously, and the article got misinterpreted because it was read quickly. I just figured I'd point it out because the clip did go around on TikTok, and that's that. I.e., Joe Rogan fans do not come for me. I surrender. I don't even know what to say for this. I just not saying anything bad about Joe Rogan. Don't come for me. The point is, this conspiracy has evolved into something that requires this long-form, multi-layered debunk. And I want to make this video before Discovery gets any ideas for another documentary, because it would probably end up having the same impact as the Megalodon one. I don't know why. For some reason, this conspiracy makes sense for a lot of people. Me, personally, not at all. The thought of a massive T-Rex, again, 40 feet long, with tiny little vestigial wings is just grotesque. An image I could easily lose sleep over, which is why I'm very excited to introduce you to today's sponsor, Helix Sleep, a premium mattress company that delivers customized mattresses right to your door. We come from a long line of sleepers. Millions and millions of generations of sleepers has led to the work of art, yet you do. Sister just get her a new match seconds later with the part. Breezy, just love it. Helix has come with the plans. Of this channel. Helix partners out the Helix book. Point number one of what this Reddit post sponsoring this video. Now, back to the nightmare that is this conspiracy. Now that we're all on the same page of what this Reddit post has turned into, existentially, let's get into the debunk. Point number one, the feathers. It is now an established fact. T-Rex were not covered in scales, but in feathers, like a bird. False. The feathers development is far from an established fact. It's actually muddy as fuck. So let's get into it. In recent years, some exceptionally preserved fossils have provided evidence for feathers in multiple different dinosaur groups, most commonly in theropods, which again includes both birds and tyrannosaurs as separate lineages, and some evidence in the tyrannosaurs, but as more primitive feathers, because yeah, the feathers that we're familiar with today didn't just pop into existence. This is considered the most complex structure on the outer layer of any animal that we know of, and they took a really long time to evolve into this that exists on birds today. And as more and more well-preserved fossils have been found, scientists have been able to essentially map what that development looked like. The first stage, as you can see, pretty similar to mammalian fur, and probably served similar functions, like camouflage, insulation. And as they became more elaborate, their functions did too. And now the feathers of birds also generate and help detect sound, form really sick displays for mating and competition, and also help with flight a lot by creating much more lift than drag in the air. But feathers existed way before flight in birds did, and flight developed in many other lineages that don't have feathers at all. So, even though the possible presence of feathers can't be used as a valid argument for T-Rex wings, I want to show you this cladogram anyway, which shows the fossil evidence of feathers in pterosaur and dinosaur subgroups. And then on the right is a more detailed look within the theropods. Aves, all the way at the bottom, is the birds. That's the group birds belong to. As you can see, they got a lot of shit going on. Simple branching feathers all the way to flight feathers. Now, let's look at tyrannosaurs. Extensive patches of scaly skin, monofilaments, which might as well be the fur version of feathers. And anything beyond that is extremely questionable, indicated by the question mark. But absolutely no flight feathers. Only the earliest stages of a feather. Also, there are other tyrannosaurs, other than T-Rex, that this applies to. There are multiple tyrannosaur species within the tyrannosaur group. Other than T-Rex, there's diversity. For example, Eutyrannus has more extensive evidence of those fur feathers. T-Rex has more extensive evidence of the scales. Maybe juvenile T-Rex had some fur feathers, kind of like how cheetah cubs have long hair on their backs to camouflage? Maybe they didn't. But honestly, it doesn't really fucking matter because it correlates 0% to this argument. So, we're gonna move on. But if you want to learn more about feathers, here's the paper I used for a lot of this section. It was very interesting, I must say. I wasn't expecting to be so captivated by the evolution of feathers. The older I get, the more I realize birds are absolutely sick. But again, for like the third time, feathers are not what make a winged animal. Wings are what make a winged animal. And what makes a wing depends on the type of animal you're talking about. In this case, a vertebrate, it's the skeletal structure. Like we've talked about in the History of Life series, all vertebrates that live on land evolved from a common ancestor, usually represented as Tiktaalik. This was part of the development of the classic tetrapod form. Tetrapod means 4 legs. Tetra, 4, pod, legs.
Mono means 1. And rail means rail.
Or let's say limbs, 4 limbs. Obviously, there have been many developments to the tetrapod shape, to say the least. To name some completely unrelated examples, whales went back to the water, lost their hind limbs, and their 4 limbs evolved into flippers. Snakes lost their limbs altogether. Bats, look at bats, dude. Their wings are wicked. But because of their common ancestry as tetrapods, even though groups have gone through insane skeletal modifications, we can still track which bones are equivalent in different groups. And so, we can see what modifications were made for the structure of a wing. So, if T-Rex had wings like an ostrich, you would expect the skeletal structures to truly be the same. And not just by squinting your eyes and looking at the 2 zoomed out pictures of the skeletons, but really comparing the arm bones and seeing that both sets of arms have the same structure, modifications, etc. Let's start with this diagram. In both humans and birds, you can see you have a humerus, radius, and ulna side by side. These are side by side. And then the wrist bones, the carpals, and then the metacarpals, and then finally the phalanges. Yes, despite what you've heard from friends, phalanges are real things.
Something's wrong with it. Something is wrong with the left phalange.
And there's a good chance you've got 20 of them. Notice the bird's metacarpals. They're fused. There was a fusion that went on to create a stronger structure for the wing. All birds have fused metacarpals, including ostriches. Boom, fused metacarpals. Humans do not have fused metacarpals. Other non-winged tetrapods do not have fused metacarpals. And T-Rex, as you can see from this diagram, did not have fused metacarpals. This is an entirely different structure than that of an ostrich. Another thing that was actually pointed out by Dan Folks on Twitter. Dan has a master's in paleobiology and an entire blog dedicated to scientifically accurate skeletal diagrams of extinct animals. So he obviously knows his shit. People are misinterpreting T-Rex's long shoulder blade as its humerus, that upper arm bone. Seems like that's a major piece of where the confusion is. Alright, the next point I want to make is a little jumbled in my head, so stay with me. I'm just gonna try and sort it out. The sentence, now we know that many different animals we think of as dinosaurs are more bird-like than lizard-like, is upsetting to me. It means nothing. You can categorize a shit ton of animals as either bird-like or lizard-like. It's like the Booba and Kiki thing. Take mammals, for example, the extended class Mammalia. Some might say a rat is more lizard-like and a kangaroo is more bird-like. That doesn't mean anything. Kangaroos have a bird-like stance, yet they are not birds and did not evolve from birds. They're an entirely different group. That is also the case with T-Rex. Is this even making sense? Do you know what I'm saying? Whatever, just scratch that. The point I really want to make is about the theropod family tree, bird ancestry, tyrannosaur ancestry. The fact that they are completely separate, and we have millions of years of evidence of that in the fossil record. Let's take a look at this cladogram, which shows how different groups of theropods are related to each other. It shows you not only where the most recent common ancestors are, but also the time period in which they lived. So, here's the tyrannosaur lineage, and then here's the bird lineage all the way at the bottom, the avian dinosaurs. If we follow those lines of ancestry back, we can see the most recent common ancestor between the two groups was the origin of the group Coelurosauria, about 180 million years ago, as you can see from the timeline at the top. That means T-Rex and birds share a common ancestor that was alive 180 million years ago. T-Rex first appeared about 68 million years ago, so T-Rex and birds are separated by over 100 million years of evolution. Let me put that into perspective. We, humans, have about the same amount of separation between us and all marsupials. All mammals, which includes us, whales, squirrels, giraffes, rats.
The rats like this, like this, like this.
Are separated from all marsupials, koalas, kangaroos, Tasmanian tigers, etc. by over 100 million years. Humans are very different from marsupials. To say that we are even remotely the same as a koala would be nuts, right? Do we have a pouch? No. Do we chronically smell like musky piss?
Some of us.
No, and anything studying us 60 million years from now wouldn't expect us to have those similarities because we're separated by over 100 million years of evolution. It might sound like T-Rex and birds are the same thing because they're both theropods. Maybe that group alone sounds small, and maybe looking at them in a cladogram makes it seem like they're pretty closely related to each other. And they are in the general scheme of like all of life on Earth, but not enough. They're not.
Like this.
And that's that. I also hope this debunks the whole myth that chickens are the closest living relatives of T-Rex. That's a totally separate thing from today, but you know, it's birds as a group, not just chickens. You can't single them out like that. Anyway, next point on my list. We know a lot about the evolution of T-Rex, its ancestors, the traits that they possessed, the fact that none of them had wings, etc. In order for T-Rex to have had wings, they must have evolved from ancestors who also had wings, or were on their way to having wings. Pretty straightforward. It's one of the few occurrences in which nature gives shit to you straight. If an animal has wings, its ancestors must have had wings, or must have been on the evolutionary path to having wings, and that was not the case for T-Rex. Instead, what scientists have noticed is a size change. The earliest tyrannosaurids were smaller, like Dilong and Guanlong. Notice, they had some pretty respectably sized forelimbs, kind of what you would be more comfortable with for a tyrannosaur. But again, they were much smaller than T-Rex, 6.5 feet and 10 feet respectively, and as time went on, species within this group generally started to get larger. Their arms, their forelimbs started to proportionally get smaller until you had species like T-Rex. At no point in this development were wings a factor in this equation. And also, this happened in other tyrannosaurid groups to a much more extreme degree that nobody seems to have a problem with. You don't seem to have a problem with a Bailosaurus, dude. Carnotaurus. Explain to me why you have a problem with T-Rex but not this. The point is, the trend of larger body size, small arms happened multiple times. Not just with T-Rex. This was just some weird theropod shit. So why did this happen? What was the real point of these useless, stubby little arms? Throughout the years, there have been plenty of ideas. Some of the earlier ideas included holding down prey, getting up from the ground after falling or laying down, which is pretty cute. Maybe to clasp onto their mate when they bang. Maybe to stab competitors, or to feed juveniles. These never really held any ground considering their size and limited mobility. Really, it doesn't make sense to think of them as used for a purpose. They got smaller over time. In a way, one could argue is similar to the loss of limbs in snakes entirely. Some scientists have thought of them as actually useless. One researcher, Gregory S. Paul, said they were not important to their owners, so they should not be important to us. Other papers have talked about the relationship to jaw muscles and arm muscles. With bigger bodies often came much bigger heads, with extremely powerful jaws. A powerful bite needs strong jaw and neck muscles, which need muscle attachments across the shoulders. And arms need muscle attachments there too. So while the jaws got more and more powerful, there had to be a trade-off at the shoulders, make way for the muscles, and the arms turned into little guys. You might be interested to know that the opposite relationship happened with theropods too, with more powerful arms and smaller heads. Take, for example, Therizinosaurus. Those claws are fucking nuts. Gigantoraptor, heinous. Dinochirus, heinous once again. So the trade-off idea has some pretty solid ground. The author of a more recent paper in 2022 takes this a step further and thinks that maybe getting smaller and smaller just to a lack of use isn't enough to explain this. Maybe T-Rex arms and similar cases of arms got smaller as an advantage, to reduce a safety hazard. There's evidence of group feeding in multiple T-Rex individuals. As the jaws got more powerful, they posed a much larger risk to their pals they like to dine with. A simple accidental bite in the wrong direction could rip an arm off. Boom. Amputation. Boom. Infection. Boom. Death. Smaller arms are nice and tucked in, out of the way. So that could have created a selection pressure for smaller and smaller arms, and that, to me, is way more interesting than the idea of wings that has absolutely no evidence to back it up. To me, exploring the possible reasons for these seemingly puny appendages is way more interesting to think about. We're so lucky to have the fossil remains of animals that existed millions and millions of years ago. There are millions, if not billions, if not trillions of species that we will never know about because they just weren't preserved in the fossil record. Think of all the weird prehistoric invertebrates we've talked about on this channel, all the way to the massive predators that dominated the planet, T-Rex included in that. All of what we know is barely scratching the surface of the diversity that existed on this planet for billions of years. Life forms that are probably 10 times more alien than T-Rex or hallucigenia, and yet we're able to uncover some of them and find so many similarities to our own life forms today. And we get to try to piece together what their life was like then using what we know now. And what we realize time and time again is that the reality of our planet is way cooler than our own imaginations. I took your advice. I'm making that a tagline for this series. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of the history of life on Earth that we know of. I know I said last time that it was going to be that one this time, and this time I mean it. Check out Helix for your perfect mattress at the link in the description. Keep up with behind the scenes content in my Discord server on Patreon. And for now, stay curious. The world has a lot for us to learn. See ya! Yeah! I heard your complaints about the pictures being too small. So I got a bigger picture frame. It's a little bit bigger than I expected, but I also moved. So I'm gonna give the updates at the end of this video because now is not the time, because today is the devotion.
You're doing ArtFight wrong. What?
It's May, which means it's basically June, which means it's basically July, which means it's ArtFight season. You may think it's too early to be preparing for an online battle to the death over OC fan art, but you're horribly underestimating how fast time passes. Believe me, you do not have that much time to set up your profile. That being said, some of you may be wondering, what the hell is ArtFight? Let me catch you up. ArtFight is an annual event that happens throughout the month of July. You can find more information on the site, but basically the aim of the game is to draw other people's characters for points. There are 2 teams every year, each with their own theme. And your goal is to accumulate as many points as you can for your team before the month ends. After the fight is over, the points are calculated and ArtFight announces the winning team. That brings us back to the title of the video. You're doing ArtFight wrong. And by you, I mean me. I've been doing ArtFight wrong. But I'm perfect, so obviously, if I get something wrong, I need to drag everyone else down with me. But Valentine, who the hell are you? Here are my credentials for making this video. I've done 3 years worth of ArtFights, dating back to 2021. But Valentine, it's 2025 right now. The math isn't mathing. I lied to everyone in 2023 saying I was going to participate, but then I didn't draw anything, okay? I guess I have to look at my stats. What are my stats? Hold on, I gotta log in. Bro was not ready to record. Here are my statistics. I have a 27.10% battle ratio, 1,817.5 points, 27 attacks,
I can look at my
2 friendly
points.
fires, and oh my god, I got my ass beat every year. I have 23 characters profiled, but for last year my
god,
battle
my
stats
shit
were
isn't...
oh. Anyways, yeah. I got my ass beat in 2023 and 2024, but it's okay, we don't have to look at them, like, we're moving on. Because we're focusing on 2025. This is my year, everyone. My year. If you're wondering what teams I joined each year, in 2021 I joined Steampunk, who won. In 2022 I joined Wither. In 2023 I joined Werewolves. I didn't post anything, so technically I don't count for that. But
did I do Seafoam or Stardust? I think I did Seafoam.
And in 2024 I joined Stardust. So safe to say I am pretty qualified for this video. I mean, like, probably not as qualified as other. I mean, like, I've watched other people's videos on ArtFight. Like, oh, I've been for 6 years. Well, okay, this pisses me. It's not a competition, but if it was, I should win. Although I may not be the most diligent art fighter, I did pretty well 1 month, so I'm pretty qualified to talk about it. This video is going to highlight my process for preparing my experience on ArtFight this year, so feel free to prepare along with me. Section 1, Rules and Regulation. It's important to familiarize yourselves with the website and the rules that come with ArtFight. Just like any other event you might participate in, it's a moderated event, and it's part of our responsibility as participants to help ensure this is a safe and enjoyable experience for us and other artists. You can get a more in-depth look at the rules of ArtFight on the website by clicking site rules right here, and it's actually pretty easy to navigate the site once you're on it. It's not rocket science. How it works: site rules, attack guide, filters guide, etc. The site is very easy to navigate, but if you're struggling with anything, you can also join the Discord server. If you join the server, I think I joined it ages ago, but now I don't have any space on my Discord server, so low-key awkward, but I'm pretty sure you can ask questions in the server. You'll find a whole community of art fighters who will be willing to help you answer your questions. I'm not going to be reading through all of these rules, mainly because it'll take too long, and I've already done my rule reading time when I started, but I highly advise you read them yourself. Make sure you follow the rules, and make sure you behave, because honestly nobody likes rude people or sexist people or ableist people or race. So yeah, as I was saying before, you'll also be able to find these other information points like how it works and the attack guide. These are super helpful for preparing, and it gives you a general sense of what sort of pieces gather the most points. You'll be able to submit your stuff here. So right now you can only submit characters because the fight hasn't begun. It is May and you are too early. When the fight actually starts, everything can seem really daunting at first. Like the site doesn't work. Yeah, the site doesn't work. Basically reading these ahead of time really allows you to get ahead of the game. It can lessen the stress of posting your very first attack. So yeah, that's rules and regulations. Section 2 is admin profile. This is the page where your bio and statistics are presented. You should make information about yourself and your strengths clear so that other people with similar interests may find you easier. My profile is currently a work in progress. For last year, I never finished it. Now you can see why I said I've been doing ArtFight wrong. I leave everything until the last minute, and when the fight actually starts, I never upload any new characters or update my profile because I'm too busy getting slapped around by attacks. This was my persona for 2024 because I joined Stardust, so I just took my persona, threw the Stardust logo on it, and then called it a day. And this was drawn by my wonderful friend Cream. Make sure you follow Cream, everyone, and attack their characters. I did have a profile for werewolves versus vampires.
damn!
I'm pretty sure my boyfriend set it up for me because I was too lazy. Where should we start? I guess we can start by removing everything. Here you can find all your settings for your profile. I've linked my YouTube channel on here, my Instagram. This is really old actually. That's not my Instagram anymore. I've moved accounts. That's also not my Twitter anymore. When looking for spaces and GIFs to decorate my profile, I like to use Tumblr. All I do is type in card resources in the search bar, and you can find a lot of interesting GIFs, dividers, borders, and other type of decor. I usually leave this part until after the ArtFight teams are released because I like to be on theme with the team I chose. But I think we can go ahead and get down to some bare bones so then I can do less work later. See, I usually leave this to my boyfriend because I'm like so bad at decorating stuff. Dude, I don't know what I want. Also, I found out that you can click this, maximize. The more you know, guys. We're learning. We're learning together. This is our year. So to add this, I think what we want to do is insert image. Okay, and then if I take this, I take the image address and then I insert it. Oh, that's cute. I also like to look up dividers or like maybe symbols and stuff like that so we can like copy this. We can choose our fonts. Obviously we gotta go with the best one. Gotta add our name, Valentine. And then we add this. And then obviously we need to go back to the best font of all time. A good thing to add in your profile is if you're participating in this year. So planning to participate. How do you spell participate? How participate? Participate.
Oh Jesus.
I think that's correct. Obviously you need to have that.
Can I not change my name?
And we can also change our color here. So we're gonna have that in red to show everyone that we mean business. So far looking good, right? Looking cute so far, looking fresh. Maybe we can take something else. Oh my god, can I make that smaller please? How do I make this smaller? Oh, that's so cute. Okay, love that. So if we look on our profile right now, adorable. Adorable. I do need to link my boyfriend now. Alright, so to add a hyperlink, what you want to do, just put this in here, like that.
Toy house.
Insert, submit. That should work. Yeah, there we go. You can click that. Goes to my boyfriend's profile. We love to see it. I know a lot of people like to put in their guideline for like if somebody's planning to draw their OC, they want you to kind of keep within global permissions. You can edit your global permissions right here. Character permissions. I've already done mine ages ago. So basically a reminder that the same icon style equals the same story.
Is there a way to do that?
Please be respectful of my character's personal permissions if they differ from my global permissions. So here I have my yeses and then here I have my nos. Don't whitewash my OCs please.
I know, okay, I know you can do that because
character permissions on the
my
next section.
name
Now
used to be
let's go
something
back
else,
to our user.
but
I like to have these up
I'm trying
just to make sure everyone knows
edit it
that
and
I've been on the
I
winning
don't
team
see
3
it where.
times. because I am an alpha. I've ended up editing it a little bit, so I've like kind of fleshed it out a bit more. I have added my priorities in terms of attacks, and I've also added what I draw, which is helpful for people kind of looking for like a... What was it called? You know, in tennis when they like hit a ball and then you hit it back and then you hit it back and then you hit it back and then you, like what was that called? A rally. If there's artists looking for a rally in terms of attacks, so you keep attacking each other and they want to keep a chain going, it's helpful for them to find artists with similar interests. Got that in there. Also got a stamp of Luffy because I love Luffy. I love you, Luffy. This is just like an idea of what you can put in your bio. It's pretty simple. Just put whatever you want. I'm not your mother. I don't have to tell you what you can put in there. You know, you can even leave it empty.
I know I got...
Be mysterious. Moving on to section 3, character profiles. Let's look at my character profiles,
How much
everyone.
is this
The most crucial part of preparing for ArtFight is to prepare your character's profiles and reference images.
Fuck you!
This is the
You're not
part
getting
I
any more
most
money.
enjoy setting up because for previous years... I just said because, like, what is the script? For previous years, I like to have my characters clearly grouped by their stories, indicated by their matching icon styles on my profile. For example, these TV icons you can see here, icons are my Color Blast characters, they all come from the same story, and these stained glass style icons are for my Exorcist OCs. You may recognize some of them from my shorts if you've seen my short. And these icons are clearly characters I don't care about. I have a couple new characters I want to add to my ArtFight profile this year, so let's go ahead and create some references.
Create a password?
I'm sure as hell not gonna use my old ones. Those are ugly. Since one of the characters I wanted to profile already had a decent reference, I only had to draw 2 new reference pages this year. This one is Marcelo and this one is Kingsley. I really don't want to talk about their lore because Loki is really stupid, but I need to find a way to fill the speed page duration, so I guess I have to talk about them. God, how do I explain this? They're both reincarnations of gods that represent a class of magic in the fantasy world I created for a roleplay group. In this world, there are 8 classes of magic: aberration, alteration, animation, conjuration, divination, enchantment, evocation, and phantasm. Marcelo here is the reincarnation of divination, and Kingsley is the reincarnation of abjuration. You'll be able to read more about them on their ArtFight profiles if you're interested. I'm pretty happy with how they both turned out. However, this was the old reference sheet, so safe to say the bar was pretty low in terms of improvement. All I had to do now is to finish off the reference sheets and add more information and details, and then I can move on to drawing the icons. Here we are on my iPad. I already have an icon because there's already a character on my ArtFight profile.
Email
in
already
this story.
exists?
His name is
Fuck
Cry.
you.
Damn, this looks kind of ugly. So I'm gonna use this as a template. I have no
Fine,
idea
as
where I
long
got this
as
frame
that
from. I guess I
is-
just googled frame and was
I
like,
swear I
yeah,
already put
I
a fucking
need
image here.
these icons to be painterly looking. But the problem is, on ArtFight you can only have like 200 pixels to 200 pixels as their icon. Obviously, trying to get like a super stylized image is not gonna be like
I did my time.
because you're not gonna see any
Believe it.
details. But what matters
You
to
broke
me the
out, didn't
most
you?
is that
Who told you that?
visually you can like look at it and be like, okay, yeah, they're the same style of icon. So that's gonna be the goal for today. I'm gonna get rid of all this. Sure. Goodbye, Cry. Hello. I don't want to draw. Let's just.
I felt that on a
let's just
deep
draw-
level.
Let's draw Kingsley because I love drawing women. And there's our 2 icons done. Since they're going to be sized down to 200 x 200 pixels, I've allowed myself to be a little messy with the finish. Now we can move to the best part of all. Writing! Since I'm all about that work smarter, not a harder life, I'm going to use one of my previous profiles as a base. This is a good example.
How do I
as it has
change
the
my
most important
goddamn
information
name in
such as
ArtFight?
name, age, and height. I also like to include a little bit of information about the character so that if an artist does decide they want to draw my character, they have a bit of writing they can take inspiration from, if they want to. In some of my other profiles, I also include some associations. So usually when I include my character's themes and motifs, it provides extra possible imagery as it helps inspire creative minds. So I'm going to just use past me as a reference.
No shit through my user settings.
Oh god, this is so embarrassing, nah. Okay, I think I went a little bit overboard. I don't really care though.
Go to the change
I
username
copied and pasted
section.
this from my
There is
Discord
no
server.
section
When I
like
say
that!
Discord server, I mean like my personal Discord server where I just shove all my OC stuff in there and use it as a storage room. I'm just gonna skip this to when I've finished both of them, and then you can see. You'll just see it, alright? You'll see the vision. You'll see it.
Am I fucking high?
Alright, so as you can see, I am now done. I have Marcelo here, and I also have
swear
Kingsley
to
here.
God,
If I go into the
I've done it
profile,
before.
You'll see, I did take
Am I
out
high?
a little bit. I took out his personality because I was like, this is too much. I might put it in again, just like maybe a little one-liner, just to say, oh,
So
he's like this and
confused.
this. And then I also linked Kingsley's profile to him because they're basically siblings. They are siblings. What am I saying? They are siblings. And I've also included my friends' OCs because they are certainly connected. They are siblings. I think I'm going to include a little tidbit about like power and like the story of power in character permissions.
Am I just
This
not allowed?
section called permissions. This is where
I've
you
done it
go
once, so I
when you
can't
wanna
do it
edit your
again. Is
permissions.
that
What happened to my screen?
what's going on?
Okay, I guess it's just like permanently broken. Anyways.
Oh, I forgot to change my Instagram.
So there we go. I have included a little bit extra information in the character permissions. You also want to make sure to include any specific instructions. That is my finished character profile for my two characters. Good work, guys. Also, what the hell? Quick note before we move on to the next section. I do recommend actually posting new character references closer to the day of ArtFight, as artists are more likely to be active or on the site. This increases the likelihood of someone picking up your reference from the new characters tab, or I think it's called recent characters tab, and saving them for the event. And that's all there is for character references. So now we're on to section 4, bookmarking characters. So let's say you find a
Your username can only be changed once every 30 days. Change your username and view more information regarding this. Please visit change username section in your settings. There is no change username!
And now you might be wondering, what else is there to do, Valentine? Before the
I'm about to
event
crash
starts,
out.
what I recommend you do is actually save the references. Because when ArtFight starts, in my experience at least, as you may know from the beginning of the video, the site sometimes is a bit slow. To make a note of the name and to save this number right here, the character's
I'm
ID.
about
This is very
to
important for when you're posting a tag.
hurt someone.
And also make a note of the user as well. And that's really all there is.
All
to
users
do.
are gonna want a free
Everyone
username
attacked my
change
boyfriend,
when they
by the
make an
way.
account,
Keep in mind, in
and
the
will
rules,
receive
there
another
is
name
a
change
section
every
about
year
good
on
faith.
January
Don't start making
1st.
attacks ahead of
Additional
time,
name
because
changes
that's
can be
kind of cheating.
earned
In my
by
opinion, the game is
contributing,
more
and you
fun
can
when
hold
make
up to
art
12
within the time
username
limit
changes
that's
at a
been given to
time.
you. So step up to the challenge and see how
I
far you
should
can
be
go.
able to. I haven't changed it
Before
in
I
like
close this off, I want
2
to say thank
years.
you if you got this far into the video. This is my first long form video about art, and depending on how
Maybe I
this
should
one
just
goes,
give it
I
up.
want to see if maybe it'll be worth making more in the future. Comment your own tips and experience on ArtFight down below because I'd love to read about it. Now, I know there was a lot of controversy around ArtFight last
Whatever.
year.
Fuck this.
The attitude of participants and the culture of expecting revenge, or specifically targeting artists with the sole intention of wanting art back. I just want to comment on how unfun that sounds. Like, bro, there are so many interesting characters and designs out there. Why are you sleeping on them? Remember, this event is hosted for fun. Please don't overwork yourself. It's ArtFight, not Burnout Simulator. Work at your own pace, and I promise you'll have a
No! No! No!
In this video.
God damn it. I'm not gonna do that. Nah. I'm not gonna watch a live stream while live streaming. That might be too gauche. Hey, pro animators make a fight scene without communicating? Ooh, what the fuck? Cute. That would be cute. Am I... Excuse me. What the fuck? What? Why are you drawing perspective?
Hey beautiful people, I'm Julie.
I don't care. No. Warn their audience. Florida was on the wrong continent. That's funny. Ooh, redesigns. I'm not even into Ever After High, but I'm always in for a good redesign.
Do you know? Do you know? Have you heard the news? There stands tall a school for the children of fairy tales, to repeat the cycle or else something grim may happen. But rumor has it, not all students are loyal and royal. They say some brave seek to rebel against their pent fate. However, you must be careful down this path, for there are some rules you truly can't break, lest the worst might happen. Do you know what they are? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know what they are? Hey, you don't think people are gonna be like really confused by this whole reference bit, are they? Nah, everyone's watched Revolution go Utsuna. This is like a whole universal thing.
Wait, what?
I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna kill you! You're dead, man!
Oh, Revolutionary Girl Utena?
Get cigarette?
I haven't heard that name in years.
That was weird.
Nah.
I'm actually a pretty big fan of Ever After High. I mean, being a fan of Monster High, it makes complete sense that I'd also like its sister series. Although, I actually got into Ever After High first, with it being my introduction into Monster High G1.
Monster High.
Thanks to all the talk and the concept
I was
art
in
that
Monster High
floating about
first.
online about that cancelled crossover movie we never got, just before Monster High's unfortunate reboot to Gen 2. But hey, at least we still got a book. That's something, right? Free cheers for books. For those that might not be in the know, Ever After High was a fashion doll franchise created by the toy conglomerate Mattel in 2013, to act as a sister series to their new hit franchise, Monster High, where instead of following the children of famous monsters and mythical creatures, it's the children of famous fairy tales, which, like, off the bat, that is such a good premise. Mattel were literally hitting both sides of the market, creating spooky and edgy alternative dolls for monsters that the kids and teens were clamoring for, but also the more pastel, classically regal princess dolls that parents were more used to and comfortable with buying at the time. And I mean, compared to Monster High, the dolls were definitely different. I know some people refer to them as pancake faces, but that just feels a bit too mean. But also, like, if the boot fits, they're nice, I swear. No, but seriously, they're nice. Gorgeous even, depending on the character or line. My personal favorites are Ash and Ella, Briar Busey, and Cedarwood. And who knows, maybe one day I'll actually buy one of them. But that's not today. Ever After High had a pretty successful run, spanning 5 core books, additional reading material, an animated series of multiple specials, and a few webisodes sprinkled here and there. The premise was simple. All of the children of popular fairy tale characters have started to attend Ever After High boarding school to sign the storybook of legend and begin preparing themselves for repeating their parents' tales. Just like the parents did before them, and theirs before them, and theirs before. Listen, you get the gist, it's a generational ceremony. And our 2 key main leads are introduced. Apple White, daughter of Snow White, who's keen to continue her family's legacy and live up to her mother's image by signing the book. And Raven Queen, daughter of the Evil Queen, who's having doubts about becoming a villain, poisoning her friend, and being imprisoned for the rest of her life, so in refusing to sign the book, incidentally forms the Rebels group, and kicks off our story of whether characters should follow fate or create their own destiny. I think, like a lot of people, I was a little skeptical going in, as the initial premise reads very simple and done before, but what truly carried it for me was the character writing, and the overarching story. So many of you complain about wanting more complex female characters, yet half of you couldn't even handle Apple White. And if you still can, there's the door.
Door, bitch!
Where I feel Monster High has very strong character writing too. Its stories were very one and done, rarely carrying over elements between them, aside from newly introduced characters and maybe a few background lines, unless you're one of Frankie's new love interests.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
The Ever After High adapted its story in arcs, allowing it to gradually develop the cast one by one, flipping the expectations you would have on them over time, and putting things to an entirely different context, while also building upon this bigger main story thread, becoming a bigger and bigger problem, before the show just sort of wraps up as a freedom of choice and everyone gets to move on thing. With the books having Shadow High, the Monster and Ever After High crossover as its ending. And it was a bit more of an insane end, but also more of a concrete ending with better wrap-up of character arcs. So you're probably wondering, hey Alpine, this all sounds so good and well put together, but Ever After High was so successful like Monster High. Whatever happened to it? To which I'd have to agree. This is a well put together video. No, wait, don't go, please. But really, with the success of the dolls and the trajectory of the series, what actually could have gone wrong for Mattel?
Not Disney.
So, I've been trying to avoid saying a certain word, but it's sort of impossible to escape. But the biggest reason to blame for Ever After High's sudden drop in quality and then disappearance can be pinned on Disney and the Descendants franchise. Now, this is a bit of a messy topic, with a key question being, who copied who? To which I, nor anyone really has the answer for. Just a little word of mouth from behind the scenes, but to make a long story short, Disney didn't like Mattel making Ever After High because they felt it was too similar to Descendants, which was also in production at the time. Note, we actually have no idea who thought of the idea first, let alone if any of them was copying each other, but knowing how cutthroat the doll industry could be sometimes, someone probably copied someone. Disney then revoked their Disney license from Mattel and gave it to Hasbro to start making Disney princess dolls. Descendants was then released as a straight-to-TV movie in 2015 to extreme success and notoriety. Descendants dolls then hit the market being cheaper than Ever After High dolls, and it definitely shows, making it more appealing to parents, but it also had that iconic Disney name attached to it, solidifying their place on the shelf. Just like with Monster High G2, Mattel starts to cheapen the quality and production of Ever After High to try and price match with Disney and Descendants, but it just doesn't work, and popularity is fading. Not having that secure Disney money, and just having spent a bunch of money redesigning Barbie back in 2013, Mattel retires Ever After High in 2016, with the series going quiet since. Now this is a very stripped-back, rushed retelling of the events, but if you like a more in-depth look into the topic, I really recommend Darling Doll's video over explaining the Ever After High and Descendants feud, which is where I got most of my facts from. And while you're there, maybe also check out their Ever After High in Defense of Applewhite video. That's a personal favourite of mine, and it helps try to paint a fairer picture of Apple, since the fandom is very, very, very ready to jump her at any given moment. Are you ready to die, Applewhite? Well, after watching Wicked back in November, that's my life. Are you ready to die?
There we go.
Hi guys.
I'll watch that.
Is very, very, very ready to jump her at any given moment. Are you ready to die, Applewhite? Well, after watching Wicked back in November, that's my line. I may or may not have been thinking a lot about Ever After High and how some of the roles fit characters pretty well. Wink wink, nudge nudge. And since so many series like Monster High and Winx have been graced with another generation of Mattel telling their stories, and with Mattel now actually working with Disney on creating the Descendants movies and dolls, we all know Ever After High isn't getting that G2 anytime soon. But that's where I thought I come in. Since the franchise isn't going to leave my brain anytime soon, why don't I try my hand at pitching a new generation? Rewrite the story and characters a little, redesign them in a different coat of paint, and you get to hear all about it. So, without further ado, why don't we crack open this book and see where this story starts? Some say the Storybook of Legends created the world. Others say the world created the Storybook of Legends. But either way, we have the book to thank for the story of life that has flourished since its inception.
I do.
Now, things were a bit boring for a bit. Land forming here, plants growing and bearing fruit there, but it wasn't until the appearance of people who began to forge their own fairy tales that the book and world itself truly expanded. Magic brought prosperity all across the land.
I want to do something
However,
like this. That's like
every story has its end.
too much.
And with no new stories having appeared in the
think.
book, the world was threatened with darkness and destruction. To delay the world's end, a solution was found, formed from the collaboration of heroes to villains and fairies. It was decided that the only way to stop the world's doom was to repeat the story again, this time with the new generation. And just like that, the book restarted, back to page 1, A Snow White's Tale, and order and balance was once again restored. However, in a world of repetition, you can only outrun an inevitable end of a story for so long. When scenes start appearing in this perfect structure, all it takes is a rebellious raven to unravel the whole thing. But is that always the right choice? And can things be so easily put back together? With the introduction of another generation, we're about to find out. Beginning this fairy tale and starting us off today, we have the one and only Raven Queen, daughter of the Evil Queen, 12th generation and the first rebel.
Oh,
For
cute!
her concept, I ran through a lot of ideas, with it taking me till the third try to really find a balance I liked. My idea was to really push this sharp, gothic, almost Lolita style, kind of like Baby Metal, but keep a bit of an academic neat side like Shadow High. I replaced her feather neck piece with a more natural traditional frilled collar, framed with a black regular collar and a vintage layer jambot collar with a purple gemstone side. That was a lot of collars I just said there. I also wanted to keep the layer skirt concept she had, but a bit more modernized and saturated. Kind of like how I also kept her hair the same tones and similar in style, but a little more casual and preppy. Kind of like Glinda's from Wicked, but with locks. Of course she's decked out head to toe in silver jewelry, since that is her color. But I didn't think her dark gloomy makeup would fit as well, so I changed it to a more sharp, cat-eyed pink and burgundy look. Now with the concept all explained, let's head over to the speed draw for a more in-depth character talk. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, I watched Wicked a couple of times. Okay, maybe a lot of times. And I was really inspired by elements of Elphaba's character that I wanted to apply to Raven. I think, like Elphaba, Raven has been mistreated and misunderstood most of her life, with judgment being thrusted upon her for being wicked, cruel, and evil. But at the same time, people only truly looked for those qualities in her, because it meant she was living up to her role as the next evil queen. While her mother revels in this, as she sees her daughter becoming just as vile as her from her reflective prison, it was her father, Good King, or rather, just King, who tried to be a positive influence in Raven's life, raising her with independence, encouraging Raven's hobbies such as writing and music, as well as giving her the freedom of choice. No matter what people may tell her, or rather want her to be, Raven is a strong, courageous, and mindful girl. And it's thanks to her father's support that she finally feels ready to question fate, knowing that there has to be a better way to solve things, and free her and many other family trees from eternal persecution. Like Apple, Raven is deeply entwined in the Snow White fairy tale, being the first fairy tale in the storybook of legends, which trickles down and triggers various other fairy tales to occur, which for a 15-year-old girl sure is a lot of pressure to have on your shoulders to play the villain in the story. If she doesn't do this, then everyone's lives are ruined. I think a really cool element would be making Apple and Raven childhood friends. Two girls inseparable at the hip that did almost everything together, all thanks to her dad who wanted to be a positive influence in her life, to distract from what people may think or demand from her. Despite their little spats and arguments, they were always there for each other, so how could Raven ever bring herself to harm Apple in any way, let alone a poisoned coma? Despite this, I think Raven's biggest struggle, apart from her fate, would be the use of magic. Magic is something only a few characters actually have, some royal, but also a lot of villains. With that in mind, I think there'd be this big stigma towards magic as a whole. Unless you're a fairy, it's seen as a cheap and quick solution for jobs, with only a few handed people being able to truly utilize it for good, or sacrificial for others' needs. Because of this, Raven has to fight the temptation to choose the easy path via her power most of the time, as by doing so, she's only reinforcing people's image of her as a villain, and thus signing the storybook of legend being fated, which means she often chooses to try and solve issues through alternative means, via her resourcefulness and intuitive nature. It's because of this she dedicates herself to finding a solution to the storybook, as there has to be another way to maintain the balance other than repeating the same stories. However, just because Raven isn't on the dark side, doesn't mean she can't enjoy the fashion sense. She loves her gothic Lolita style, with elements of traditional goth Victorian aesthetic slipped in, with her frills, black lace, and bold patented purples drawing eyes. Apart from being the first to rebel, Raven's reason was the easiest of everyone's, being something that sat on her mind since she was a child. She refuses to follow her destiny of wickedness and isolation, harming her childhood best friend Apple by poisoning her into a coma, and being imprisoned in a mirror for the rest of her life, which, like, shock her? Raven never meant for her action of rebellion to cause such a reaction and stir among students, and incite the story to unfold. But despite her uncertainty as a leader, she takes it if it means helping to save others who are doomed to suffer like her. However, despite being sure there must be another way to solve the book, is Raven's path truly the best pick? What if the rumor that people disappearing wasn't such a tall tale after all? And with the Snow White being the first tale in the storybook of legends, her choice deprives everyone of their choice to go along with their own fates. Hopefully, Raven can find a solution to the world's end before the book closes once and for all. And here's the finished result. I know it's pretty close to the concept sketch, but I think the refining of all the detailing and textures is what ties it all together for me. That, and I love how the hair turned out. It really reads as a more modern take on the original style. Now, is this a plausible doll design? No. But it probably could work for a 2D rigged show, so that's a win for me. Either way, I love it, and I hope you like it too. Descending from the same fairy tale, we can't leave out our second protagonist and vital role in Raven's destiny, Apple White. Daughter of Snow White, 12th generation and proud royal. For her concept, I wanted to portray something still very fashionable yet regal, but also a little more academic and befitting of a school environment. A little like Glinda's wardrobe, you say? Okay, I promise I'll stop with the wicked comparisons for now. But I wanted something more stripped back yet still fancy, that can make Apple's other gowns and fancy dresses stand out more on royal occasions, and not just like an everyday thing for her. I mean, being that perfect 24/7 must take a toll eventually. Her hair is similar to her G1 look, but I went for more of a half up, half down ponytail design. Her jacket's a lot longer and more frilled, her skirt more rounded and apple-like, with a ruffled royal pattern, a little like Princess Peach's dress, and I changed her strappy heels to be covered by these cute spats to give into this formal look. And despite not changing too much of her overall design, I at least wanted to make Apple smaller and rounder to really help contrast Raven's sharp and tall stature. But now you know my design thoughts, let's get into her character. Whereas Raven has spent most of her life having a negative influence thrusted upon her, Apple spent most of her life pampered and smothered in a positive influence. Horseback riding, etiquette classes, tea parties, galas, slumber parties, trips to other realms, Apple got it all, and whenever she wanted. After all, a Snow White always gets what they want. It's only right, and only because they are good. Who cares if she doesn't have silky black hair? It's not like the maids whisper about it in the halls. Who cares if she's more peachy than Snow White? Nothing a little makeup and foundation can't hide. Who cares about the rumors that she actually needs glasses? A Snow White is always perfect, even in her vision. In my adaptation of Apple, I really wanted to push the metaphor of the glass coffin, with it being a stand-in for how she shuts people out of her life and hides what she really feels, who she truly is, as a way to maintain this perfect, pristine, and pure image. Apple White has to be perfect until she fulfills the Snow White legacy, so she'll be whatever people need her to be to get there. But when cracks start to appear on the glass, can Apple keep hiding herself away as her story's thrown amok? As mentioned, Apple and Raven were close childhood friends, but it wasn't just all because of Raven's father, but also Apple's own mother, Snow White, who also agreed to this, seeming so kind and understanding of the situation, wanting nothing more but for the best of the girls. But in reality, she hoped to plant the early seeds of distrust and betrayal amongst them, helping to create a Snow White tale even bigger and better than before, one with drama. I mean, what's more shocking than Apple being poisoned by someone who she loved and trusted, gave everything to, just to have it thrown back in her face by a truly wicked and evil queen? Apple lives for her destiny, determined to guarantee her own and everyone else's happily ever after, by any means necessary. I mean, to follow the storybook of legends and maintain order is the most sensible thing to do. Without it, we have no idea if people will disappear, stories change, the world succumb to darkness. Despite wanting to generally help people's stories, her kindness can come across as forced. She puts all her energy into socializing academic pursuit, trying to find ways of bettering others who might not fit into the typical status quo. Yet Apple doesn't entirely fit in herself either, having broken up with daring Charmin just before school was back in session. It was nothing to do with him. They were childhood sweethearts after all, and he did his best to treat her well and make her comfortable. But something just felt missing between them. And she'll love him eventually once her story plays out anyway, so despite everything, why does Darling Charming sit on her mind so often? What is it that draws her in so much when she sees her sword training, or strutting down the hall? Oh, you thought I was gonna leave Appling out my generation? Nah, Applin Nation, let me hear you make some noise! Out of most of the cast, Apple will definitely be the last to rebel, taking place much later in the story. Apple is saved from a poison apple by Darling, reversing her own tale with Darling being the one poisoned into a coma. Her destiny. The one thing Apple clung to fulfill, to show her mother she's worthy of this family's legacy. And with nothing left to lose, Apple finally hits a snapping point, opening up about hating the royals, being prescribed a fate by your parents they'll never live up to, forced to love and marry who they want, never once ever being free to truly be happy. But just as much, she hates the rebels too, not following your destiny for something you don't know, Not considering all those that will get hurt or disappear for your choices, not even having a solution for the end of the world before making such a big choice without ever even consulting her, confiding with her, asking if she would rebel too. Apple just wants to be Apple. The real Apple. And with this fairy tale already out of control, Apple takes control as the hero of her tale, and through true love's kiss, she wakes Darling, demanding that the both of them write a better tale together, and one where she gets to be saved at least once by her knight in shining armor. And with Apple becoming a rebel, finally refusing to sign the book, it's now up to the girls to find a solution to rewrite the storybook of legends and save the world from an era of darkness. But can they truly do it? Is there really a solution? And here's Apple finished up. Not too different from the initial concept apart from a few swap colours, but still the iconic Apple we all know and love. I especially love how the corset detailing turned out, all topped up with that white bow. Once again, would this work on a doll? Probably not without everything having to be a printed pattern, but a lot more plausible than Raven's design at least. But at this point, I'm just drawing detailed outfits for fun, so who cares? I like her and I hope you do too. Now for our first Wonderlandian, we have the ever so bubbly Maddie Hatter, daughter of the Mad Hatter, 11th generation, and despite her royal standing in Belize, she's a rebel who trusts Raven enough to stand by her side for such a big decision. For her concept, Maddie was actually one of the first ones I drew, as I just had such a strong idea in mind already for her, mostly because Maddie's actually one of my favourite characters, not only because she's a Gemini like me, but because of how funny, caring, resourceful, and just well designed she is. She's such a breath of fresh air in writing a character who's quirky, silly, unserious, without that solely being who she is or relies on. Now, you might be wondering, if she's my favourite character in all of Ever After High, why didn't I mention her doll as one of my favourites? Well, that would be because I think most Maddie dolls just don't look like her. Like, don't get me wrong, they're all incredibly well designed and thought out, but none of them ever actually capture Maddie's face correctly for me. The closest I think would be the Powerful Princess tribe, where I feel they got her cheeky grin right, but even then, it doesn't jump out to me as a must-have sort of doll, you know? Anyway, because of this, I wanted to make Maddie really cheeky, with a big grin and large eyes. I also thought to mix her up from her dad by making her more sweet Lolita themed, with her outfit featuring more frills and lots of tea and dessert references, her hair being curlier and tied to two big pigtails, and just a lot of strawberry and cherries dotted around. My personal favourite touch is when I change her bag from being the old teapot design to a repurposed jam jar with a spout. To be honest, this design is more of a reimagining of Maddie than a redesign, because I already think her OG design was just so iconic and well put together. Despite that though, I'm still going to try and add my own twist, so let's get into her character and story. Maddie is a strange one to a lot of people in Bookend. Having moved a few years back to open a cafe and tea shop, the Hatters were known for being rather eccentric and unconventional. But to them, that's just the average Wednesday. She takes pride in being a Wonderlandian, and doesn't hide her culture or behaviours because of it. Even if it means she doesn't fit in very often, she never felt deterred to transfer back to Wonderland once it came to high school enrollment. In fact, she embraces new places and challenges. A little like Alistair, she's curious to learn more about the other realms that exist, to take in all of the world and bring that knowledge back to help future Wonderlandians, or lost travellers who wind up at her tea parties. Which, speaking of, Maddie's mad. Do you see what I did there? Having worked at her dad's shop, she's always been offered the freedom to be who she wants to be in life, because a Hatter can achieve anything, as long as they set their mind to it. But despite this, Maddie's still ever so keen on taking over the Mad Hatter role. Having seen all the different ways people like their drinks, the emotions they express as they sit and eat, the changing of seasons and changing of customers, she came to appreciate the joy of uplifting people's days through the tea she pours, and the pastries she bakes, and the pastries she bakes, and the pastries she breaks. Oh my god, breaks! And the pastries she bakes. She even took over the responsibility of managing the afternoon tea party sessions for her dad as practice, which mostly goes off without a hitch. Although creating a new menu each time has led to a few food combinations she has since learned are not how you say edible or even legal, which ties back into all her dessert and sweet theming added into her outfit. But regardless, this just inspires her to bake even more, taking part in the school's cooking club led by Ginger B. House, who shares her same passion for experimenting with food. While Raven and Apple may be close childhood best friends, with a strange relationship with the whole "I'll poison you" thing, Raven and Maddie are no question asked best friends, having met after Maddie and her father first moved, and hitting it off immediately, with both girls bonding over their struggle to really fit in, and the judgmental looks they receive for just being themselves. Something that starts to matter a little less when you have someone else to share it with. Raven never truly got to open up so much with Apple, but with Maddie, she felt like an open book, being able to say what she wants and being heard, because while the Hatters might not be the most conventional, they know the importance of listening to others. How else would you throw a good tea party? I also decided that it'd be funny if Maddie and Kitty Cheshire were actually related as cousins. Just explain why they both have similar cheeky smiles, or that maybe that's just something Wonderlandians have. Always got something to grin and smirk about, I guess. But also give reason for them both having fourth wall breaking powers too. I'm not sure
more
whose
red, but I
they
don't.
share, but for now, let's just say that Cheshire Cat's sister
have
married the
anything
Mad
this
Hatter, making them
saturated
cousins.
with like
But because of that,
the
they already
yellow
know
that
each
I
other,
have.
and are both finding their way in Ever After High ever since Kitty transferred over, and with each wanting to follow their fate, they actually get along pretty well, being able to understand each other in a different wavelength, and help reduce feeling homesick. Plus, Maddie always loves to throw a private tea party just for the two of them to catch up and indulge in a little gossip around the school. I think, like Raven, Maddie would also be a very early rebel, witnessing Raven's refusal to sign a storybook, and watching the school slowly turn on her, but seeing a friend in trouble, she immediately stands by her side with no questions asked. Despite doing what any best friend would and supporting them, Maddie also believes in what Raven's saying and standing for. Destiny should be made by the freedom of choice, not by force. Even if it means compromising her fate as the next Mad Hatter, someone shouldn't be made into something they're not. Okay, Queen for the people, let's go. While Maddie trusts Raven, she does have her reservations, and having skim-read a bit further into the story, she knows things aren't going to be easy, and the consequences are definitely going to start taking a toll. But to keep it spoiler-free, she'll keep it bottled up to herself. Besides, they're bound to forge a new happy ending for everyone, right? Maybe she should have read a little bit further. And here's Maddie all done, and I love how she turned out. She feels the most similar to her original design, but shifted in a slight different direction for a whole new take, and I especially love how her face turned out. She looks so cute and welcoming, plus the little dimples on her cheeks. Mattel, I am begging you, please bring my girl back. The world needs Maddie Hatter again. Either way, I really love how she looks, and I hope you do too. From her bed rising from slumber, we have Briar Beauty, daughter of Sleeping Beauty, 4th generation and a royal. For her concept, it was a little like Raven's, where I had to refine the idea over time. What I knew I wanted was something that looked like fancy frilly pajamas, but also passed for an everyday outfit, to give the idea that she gets up and goes straight out to the world, but also can just fall back asleep any minute, with the initial concept being a mix of Sabrina Carpenter and Hime Garu. Something to lean into her party girl nature, but also use the makeup to make her eyes look more droopy and sleepy. However, I wasn't really feeling the blouse was working, nor the PJ bell bottoms. So I went back to the drawing board.
No, I want the PJ bell bottom.
I finally got something I was happy with. And now Briar has her hair bumped up in the back and all wavy, filled with her iconic pink streaks, but also some blonde to help give a Neapolitan color scheme. She has a lacy night mask instead of glasses, this cute Gary pajama blouse I found, her rose petal shorts, some fishnets, which like Mattel would never approve of, so just imagine they did, these fluffy furry leg warmers, tall slipper looking pumps, and of course can't forget her heart-studded purse that she repurposes as a pillow whenever she gets tired in class. Also, her makeup is a bit of a trust the process type of thing going on, so I promise it looks better in the finished result, but with that, let's just hop into Briar's character and story, shall we? As some of you with more keen eyes and ears might have spotted, unlike the other girls being 11th, 12th or 13th generation, Briar is just 4th generation of the family. Unlike the other stories who repeat their fairy tales every 30 to 50 years, Sleeping Beauty's story requires a cursed sleep of up to 100 years, meaning they're always skipping a generation or two before awakening and having to adjust to a whole new world and pass the curse to the next of kin. So Briar already feels a lot of pressure from her legacy, having seen her mother struggle to learn and adapt to their new world since hers was 100 years ago. It makes her even more reluctant to go along with fate, but by signing the book she ensures stability in the world for people to keep experiencing their lives and for her mother and father not to disappear. So she's happy doing her part, even if something feels wrong about it. Because of all that, Briar chooses to live in the moment, keeping up her bubbly party girl personality, who embraces any challenge without fear. Secret party in the Enchanted Woods? Let's go. Fishing at Bookend Pond? Why not? Skydiving from the giant beanstalk? Absolutely. If she only has a few more years free, Briar might as well live it up now, even if she's putting herself out there too much, regardless of the danger. She'd also really just love to travel the realms, experience all the different cultures, maybe even get into media and magazine publishing, since she always loves reading a good fashion, lifestyle, or travel magazine. Despite sleeping for 100 years, Briar wouldn't be alone. Apart from the stranger who'll wake her up, she'll have Fable Fawn, the soon-to-be dark fairy who curses her. While it might seem complicated wanting to befriend your soon-to-be villain, it's already water under the bridge for Briar. After all, just as how she can't control her own fate, neither can Fable. Why should she punish her for being forced to be bad? Especially having seen how Raven proves Birthright has no connection to wickedness. Despite things seeming all pleasant, Briar still keeps a distance between the two, never introducing her to her friend group, not inviting her to parties often, rarely talking in the hall, almost like she's some dirty secret to her, which works for Briar as she likes to keep her personal life and fairy tale life separate, for her to enjoy each to the fullest. But maybe she should consider how Fable feels once in a while. Things aren't always as nice and clean as they appear on the surface, and maybe by keeping those two worlds separate, she's doing more damage than she realizes. Briar has also known Apple and Raven since childhood, and while not as close, still counts both of them as reliable friends, and knows more about their real sides. So when the choice arises, she stands as a royal to support Apple, believing that it's right to protect the world and its people, even if she thinks Raven has a point. However, Briar and Apple would later come to conflict over this decision, with Briar finding Apple's hypocrisy for wanting to help people, when she's privileged enough to get a good story.
You get poisoned for what, like a week?
To force a choice onto people when it comes to their future isn't fair, but is it fair for Briar to risk her loved ones in Fable too? I think Briar's rebellion would happen around a midway point in the story, with her leaving Apple to stand by Raven's side, finally deciding what her own destiny will be, and staying with the friends and family she has now, in this moment. Restarting her life with a stranger in a new world isn't really her vibe, you know? However, just because it's easy for her to decide doesn't mean it is for Fable, who was told time and time again they'd fulfill their fate together. Yet, without even a single thought or discussion, Briar just turns her back on her? While Briar may have picked Raven's side, Fable chooses Apple, firmly standing by her, flipping the dynamic of who you would perceive as good and bad, although I suppose we don't fully know Fable's story yet either. And here's Briar all finished.
Who is Fable? Is that supposed to be like Maleficent's daughter?
Turning out, but I wish I managed to work a bit more magenta or pastel pink into the overall design, sort of like my concepts. But with the black and pink Garu style, she definitely stands out and has a bold look to her compared to the rest of the girls. Plus, I love how her shoes, bag, and hair turned out. So regardless, it's still a favorite for me, and I hope you like it too.
Okay, does this work?
A girl who sings to the birds and mice, distracting herself from the dark path that lay ahead. We have Ashlyn Ella, daughter of Cinderella, 12th generation, and a secret rebel. For her concept,
that works.
I wanted to try something very different. Since I already love the OG Ashlyn with her unique silhouette with the puffy sleeves, a very different skirt design, and a bumper-up hairstyle, I thought why try and stick to the formula like I did with Apple and Maddie when I'm probably not going to do it justice. So with Ashlyn, I completely flipped it. I wanted to make her more of a trendsetter, since she makes her own clothes and accessories, standing out a little bit more as modern compared to the other girls, with her cardigan, 2-layered blouse dress, these lace leg warmers covering her glass slippers, and a beret filled with needles as if it were a pincushion. She's got a long flowing ponytail with a single braid curling round it to help always put focus on her outfits. And I ended up changing her bag from the OG clock, which was already such a beautiful design for a bag, to a carriage to reference the carriage Cinderella took to the ball.
Cinderella.
She's also a little curvier with lots more freckles because I just thought she looked cute like that. Now let's move on to her tale. Ashlyn Ella is a polite and well-mannered girl who takes great pride in helping those around her. Unlike Apple, who lavishes in being a royal and a princess, Ashlyn was taught by her mother, Cinderella, at a young age to be humble and acknowledge the privilege of being born a princess, using it to advocate for both what's right and good, always offering a helping hand no matter who needs it. Because of this, she tends to stick out at formal events, knowing her basic etiquette and dance moves, but always struggling with talking to other royals, who always seem to speak about what they'll do to help when they're older and take over the kingdom, but never about what they're doing to help now. Although appearing as a wallflower to others, Ashlyn actually has a lot to say, She just chooses to say it to the animals in the woods, an ability to understand them being passed down from her mother, and the one thing about her fate she's grateful for. Besides, Ashlyn prefers to be in her studio anyway, designing outfits for others to wear. Having heard Cinderella's stories when she was young, about how she'd create her own outfits and dresses with the help from the mice and birds when she was a teen, despite the whole family predicament, Ashlyn was inspired to create as well, choosing to work at a local boutique where she claims it's because of the amazing shoe selection, always finding the right pair for an outfit. But in secret, she loves to work in her little studio in the back, designing something bold and statement-worthy. Is it really fashionable if it doesn't draw people's attention? However, she worries about her mother's opinions on this secret hobby, especially when she hasn't been so well as of late, being bedridden once again. Besides, what would others think if they all knew she had little to no interest in shoes? Isn't that Cinderella's whole thing? But shoes don't make up a whole outfit, and Ashlyn wants to go all out with her creativity and dress people head to toe. It was during one of Ashlyn's woodland excursions that she eventually ran into Hunter, a character she thought the animals were just making up because who had ever seen a guy erratically training in the woods all hours of the day? Yet, here he was, asking if she understood the animals too. While Hunter understood them via their behavior and gestures, he was enamored by Ashlyn's understanding of their speech, and with each curious to learn the other's technique, they made an agreement. They were planned to meet up from time to time in secret to carry out some animal lessons, sharing their knowledge and skills. Although it was a lot easier for Ashlyn to learn the animals' behaviors than it was for Hunter learning their speech, although he at least has a grasp on a few words now. What started off as finally finding a friend that they could understand and confide in with their secret hobbies and love for nature slowly started blossoming into something else that neither of them could really believe, or rather, wasn't sure that they could even have. It was upon one secret meetup that was barely a lesson at all, where Ashlyn had offered Hunter a custom-made hoodie after he had mentioned getting too many holes in his last one, and Hunter offered a basket with an assortment of flowers he had collected to be used as unique dyes for her clothes. And it was then that the two realized that they might have found something other than a friend in the woods. Knowing this conflicted with both their destinies, a secret was made, choosing to date out of prying eyes and judgment until their stories began to play out when they'll totally stop dating for real. Like, actually, this is just a one-time thing and never again. Because of all this, I think Ashlyn will rebel quite early. Having her secret threatened to be outed to the whole school, she takes things back into her own hands and proudly proclaims her love for Hunter, her boyfriend. She doesn't need to wait around for some stranger to swoop in and love her when she already found love herself. And besides her relationship status, she doesn't want her destiny to lead to her mother and father's untimely and early deaths. While it's something out of her control due to the circumstances of the Cinderella tale, she already feels responsible enough for her mother becoming bedridden. So besides the risk of disappearing and an era of darkness, she has nothing left to lose, and embraces being a rebel, hoping for a better future for everyone. And here's Ashlyn all finished, and she surprisingly turned out to be one of my faves. I was a little worried she might have appeared too modern and stand out against the rest of the cast, but I think that works in her favour, looking like a fashion designer that takes risks. And while I love the lace leg warmers, and I think it makes for a campy reference to her original glass slippers that spiraled up her leg, and her focus on fashion design rather than shoes, I did make a variation without them just so you can see the detail on the slippers. But now her legs look so empty. Either way, she's one of my favourite colour-wise, and she looks super cute, so I hope you like her too. And with that, we're done with the first lot of G2 Ever After High characters, and I hope you like them so far. I know this is a little different from my usual video writing, as I tend to talk about the process of making the characters as opposed to their personality and stories, but I think if I'm going to label something a rewrite, I should probably talk about the elements I'm rewriting with them, which I hope was at least a little bit interesting. I should probably mention I've not actually read the books, just watched the show, specials and webisodes. I know, but just bear with me. I've only just started listening to the first book via audiobook, which Anarchy, who you should totally check out their channel, hooked me up with. So maybe let me know how different the book is down below, because I definitely feel like some of the concepts and relationships I pitched are probably more developed in the books than they are the show. And once again, thank you Anarchy for the link to the audiobook. My favourites out of the lot definitely have to be Ashlyn, Raven, and Maddie, but I'd love to hear who yours were down below, or maybe even who you'd love to see in a part 2, because this story is far from over. I also hope you like my idea for the Storybook of Legends. I wanted to give the whole concept a bit more intrigue, by having the stories be a process forced to repeat over and over as a solution to the end of days. However, a flawed system is obviously going to have flaws, and it's hitting its breaking point, so it's up to the next generation to find a solution that the previous had failed in doing so. I also wanted the importance of Raven and Apple being the first fairy tale to start the book, meaning their conflict in signing jeopardizes everyone else's chances at their happily ever after. This in turn makes Raven seem way more rebellious, but also doing something dangerous, especially with the rumor, or rather curse, about people disappearing if you refuse to sign, coming true, as certain characters and fairies will cease to exist without their role to fulfill. But who could those characters be? And will they come back? Guess you'll just have to find out. But despite the struggle, it makes this ever more worth fighting for, with the increase in rebels symbolizing the goal and struggle for change and a better future. Meanwhile, I was hoping to push Apple as a bit more of a rival or anti-hero, aware that she's being pushed into a life and fate that's not really suited for her, but one that ensures everybody's safety and happiness, including her parents. So she goes along with the belief she's saving the world the right way, just like her ancestors have, unaware that commitment to tradition and order, even if for the better good, is trapping her more and more in that glass coffin, isolated and alone. If only there was a princess in shining armor who could support her in leaving her own prison. Ultimately, the adults have failed another generation, just as theirs did them. But despite the world's impending end, with the era of darkness, it will be the next generation who will unite their hope, their dreams, and their determination to bring in a new chapter to this story, and finally close off the past. I'm sure it all comes off as a little preachy and way too much for like a kid's preteen demographic, but you know, this is my video, so I get to write this how I want. How about them apples? Now, before I wrap up for real, I just want to give a quick shout out and recommend some of my personal favorite Ever After High redesign fits that you should totally watch too if you're looking for more of this. First up, we have Octodrawn, who was one of my biggest inspirations for this vid. I love their whole presentation in the videos, and they even revisited their designs in a recent vid, so I'd really recommend checking it out. Next, we have Baby Carrot Art, who picked a fun selection of characters, picking between 3 main characters and 3 side characters to mix things up. Plus, the outfits and the way they draw faces is just so good, I'm jealous. Furthermore, we have Zomberry, whose rendering style is just mwah. Their Raven design changed lives. Plus, it has some Bunny Blanc appreciation, and that girl really needs it. I mean, just look at her. Okay, don't look at her. Get out. Go watch Zomberry's video. You wanna watch Zomberry's video real bad. Oh, you wanna watch Zomberry's video real bad. What the fuck am I doing? And last but not least, we have Inkyo, which feels a bit of a cheat since that video has like over 90k, so you've probably already seen it yourself. But it's been 6 months, and I'm just saying, I'm still waiting on part 2. Where is it? Where is it, Inkyo? I've been waiting. Where is it? I want my part 2. You haven't done my girl Ashlyn yet. No, but seriously, it's a great video, and you should definitely check it out. Just like how you should check out all these videos. But with all that out of the way, I hope you had a good time watching and have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. See ya!
Today we're going to be talking about the one, the only, Ever After High. I think this is my first dedicated video revolving around Ever After High, actually, which is almost hard to believe because it is one of my favorite doll lines and media franchises. I could literally talk about it for hours, which might happen today, we'll see. But today's video is all about one of the central characters in the franchise, Applewhite. And this is a video I've kind of intended to make for a long time. This is a subject I felt pretty strongly about basically since Ever After High first launched in 2013. Oh my god, that was almost 10 years ago. So as you can imagine, I have a lot to say about Apple here. Mainly about how I've never been too happy with her general perception or how the fandom has treated both her and the role she played in the series. And I realize that if I just dive deep into this, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense if you're not extremely familiar with Ever After High or its story. So I do want to spend some time going over that just for the sake of continuity and clarity. But I do want to say that I can't spend too much on recapping the plot, and that's mainly just that Ever After High's storyline is very, very intricate and honestly kind of difficult to describe if you're not familiar with it. So if you are just like completely unfamiliar with the series, you've never watched any of the webisodes or movies, this is my plea to go watch them right now. They're very, very good. I promise you won't regret it. And when you're done, just come back and finish this video. I promise I'll still be here. I can wait. So, Ever After High. It launched in 2013 by toy giant Mattel as a sister series to the wildly popular Monster High. but rather than the characters being children of legendary monsters, they're the children of important figures from fairy tales. Some of the first characters that we meet include the subject of this video, Applewhite, daughter of Snow White. There's Raven Queen, daughter of the evil queen from Snow White's story. Briar Beauty, daughter of Sleeping Beauty. Maddie Hatter, daughter of the Mad Hatter. Ashton Ella, daughter of Cinderella. And Hunter Huntsman, son of the Huntsman. No, subtlety was never the strong suit here. Now, unlike Monster High, Ever After High had a very strong continuity to it. The webisodes and movies all had an ongoing, overarching storyline. It mainly revolved around a conflict between the two main characters, the aforementioned Applewhite and Raven Queen. At Ever After High, it is the students' responsibility to relive the stories that their parents went through. And there's the implication that this is a cycle that's been continued repeatedly. This means that some characters will get their happily ever afters, but some characters have tragic endings or are forced to be villains even if they're not bad people by nature. Such is the case with Raven. Her mother is the evil queen, which means that her destiny is to poison Apple so that Apple can get her happily ever after, which results in Apple becoming the kingdom's next monarch and basically the most important figure in their world. Raven, however, will have to suffer the consequences of being essentially the world's most prolific villain. This is something that at this point is considered pretty vital to the continued existence of the fairy tale world. The students are told that if they don't follow their destinies and continue this cycle, then their stories will disappear and they'll all go poof, as they say in the show. Raven, however, doesn't want to follow her destiny. She's not evil, she's jaded and a little bit bitter, but also kind-hearted and loyal, and most importantly, wants to make her own choices in life. Perfectly rational, but this is where the central conflict arrives. If she doesn't poison Apple, then Apple's story doesn't play out, and Apple doesn't get the happy ending that's promised to her. Not only that, but their lives are at risk. There is the possibility that they'll vanish if their story doesn't play out. Raven inadvertently becomes a leader of a movement called the Rebels, who want to dismantle the idea of having a predetermined destiny. Apple becomes a leader of the opposing faction, the Royals, who want to keep things as they are, either to preserve their own stories or for their own safety. Okay, got all that? Unless you're like me and let this series consume too much of your life for several years and you don't even need to be told all this. But now we have the backdrop conflict of the entire series. And it's a very compelling conflict, one that the marketing of the series encouraged you to pick a side in. It was actually a lot of fun. Despite this, because a lot of people in fandoms tend to be allergic to nuance, there was the pervasive idea that the Rebels were the quote-unquote right side, and Apple was more or less treated as the villain of the series. She was referred to as selfish, entitled, narcissistic, greedy, egotistical, etc., etc. And I wanted to make this video because from the very beginning, I found Apple's character to be very complex and interesting. I was very drawn to her. I'd say even now, she's still one of my favorites, so I want to look back and celebrate her for a little bit. I just feel like by disregarding her side of the conflict and treating her like the villain really does a great disservice not only to her, but to the series as a whole. And there's really going to be 3 big parts to this. Talking about Apple as a character, talking about her role in the Royal Rebel conflict, and also talking about her character development throughout the series. So, maybe you're one of those people that hated Apple, but you're willing to hear me out. Maybe you're one of those who really liked her and now you're feeling very vindicated. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and let's get into it. So, let's talk about Apple first. Her character, who she is. So, as mentioned, Apple is the daughter of Snow White, who in this world is a monarch figure and central to the most important story. Of all the happily ever afters, Apple's is unquestionably the happiest. She is an extremely beloved figure in the school, thanks not only to her privileged status, but also because she's genuinely a very kind and hardworking person. She puts effort into bettering her community, she's intelligent and diligent, she's a great leader, and she takes being the future queen very seriously. Despite her ideological differences with Raven, she still considers her to be one of her best friends. Apple can be persistent and obnoxious in her attempts to convince Raven to follow her destiny, but she still respects and appreciates Raven. A very defining moment for Apple comes from the movie Thronecoming, when Apple finds herself inadvertently wrapped up in a scheme to trick Raven into following her destiny set up by the headmaster of the school. When she finds out about this, she confronts him and says that Raven needs to make up her own mind, that it's not worth it if her destiny comes from being deceitful.
Raven needs to make up her own mind. She doesn't need to be tricked into doing what you think is right.
And despite this video's title, this is not a defense of Apple in the sense that I want to ignore her flaws. I think she's a very endearing character, but she does have flaws. And I think it's these flaws that help make her such a great character, and the fact that the series isn't afraid to show and confront these flaws. Obviously, one big flaw is that Apple is somewhat self-absorbed. She seems both very aware and also unaware of her own privilege, to the point that she willfully ignores the problems that her friends are going to face in their futures. From the same movie, Thronecoming, Briar calls her out on this, and this was kind of shocking because prior to this, Briar was one of Apple's biggest supporters. And although Briar does technically have a happily ever after, it's a bittersweet one. As the next Sleeping Beauty, she has to sleep for 100 years and will lose all of her friends in the process. And the fact that Briar would be upset about this is something that Apple seemed to have never even considered because she was too caught up in the rules of the world they're meant to follow.
But Briar, we all have our part to play. Easy for you to say, Apple. You get poisoned for what, like a week?
Apple is also very insistent on order and logic. In Way to Wonderland, we see pretty plainly that Apple has trouble thinking abstractly, which makes a lot of sense, that she would have difficulty even imagining a world that's not ruled so strictly by rules and predetermined destinies that they need to follow. We also see that a lot of her attitude also comes from Apple's childhood and family situation. We don't actually meet Apple's mother until very late into the series, but we do get little instances here and there that point to Apple feeling pressured to act a certain way and carry herself to a high standard. For one, Apple actually needs glasses, but she refuses to wear them. She mentions this in the diary that came with her basic doll. One of the playsets modeled after Apple's dorm room also comes with a pair of glasses, revealing that Apple intentionally hides them. And although it's not definitively stated why, it's heavily implied that she's afraid that wearing glasses or even having imperfect vision would be perceived as a flaw. There's also the issue of Apple's blonde hair, which notably does not match the popular descriptions of Snow White having dark black hair. The main series does not really address this, though I do think it must have been a very deliberate design choice. One of these short stories by author Shannon Held does feature Apple's blonde hair being a point of contention, with some people considering it a flaw in Apple's otherwise perfect beauty, and is implied to be another insecurity of Apple's. But what's important about this is that it reveals that Apple's appearance and behavior are heavily monitored and scrutinized by the public to ensure that she is worthy of being Snow White's successor, that she faces an immense amount of pressure to be perfect and to follow her destiny exactly as expected. We also see in the movie Dragon Games that Apple's mother's hair isn't naturally black either, fun fact. So, yes, Apple is somewhat selfish and self-absorbed, but it's easy to see where that comes from. How Apple has been molded not only to care so much about her destiny, but to care about the subjects of her kingdom too, and their safety. Following her destiny is the best thing for her. Why wouldn't it be for them too? It's for their own good, after all. If they don't, they may actually die. And it's her duty as their queen to protect them from that and to ensure that her kingdom runs smoothly. And as pure as Raven's motivations are, she threatens that. And that's where the Royal Rebel conflict comes in. And what I love about this debate is that, despite the fandom's insistence, there really wasn't a right or a wrong side. It wasn't black and white. Both Apple and Raven had motivations that were simultaneously selfish and selfless. Apple was selfish because she wanted to secure her own privileged future and remained almost willfully ignorant to the plights of those whose futures weren't as cushy as hers. But selfless because she genuinely believed that she was protecting everyone and keeping the world safe and in order. Raven was selfless because she wanted everyone to be able to choose their own destinies, to not be subjected to tragic endings beyond their control, but was selfish because she was motivated by her own self-interest and was willing to put everyone's life in danger to get a happy ending for herself. And we see the malleability of this conflict manifest in the other characters too, such as Briar, who we talked about a little earlier, who, despite the tragic circumstances of her future, initially identified as a royal to support her friend. There's also Raven's best friend, Maddie, who actually was extremely fond of her destiny and looked forward to it, but was willing to sacrifice it if it meant Raven getting a future where she's happy. Then there are characters like Duchess Swan, daughter of the Swan Queen from Swan Lake, who had a tragic ending to her tale, but still identified as a royal because her primary motivation was to steal someone else's happily ever after. Rosabella Beauty, daughter of the titular Beauty and the Beast, is a rebel because she wants better treatment for fairy tale creatures that are mistreated and misunderstood under the current system. Fabel Thorn, daughter of the Dark Fairy from Sleeping Beauty, is a royal simply because she loves being a villain and is motivated by spite. Like I said, there's really no right or wrong answer here. Everyone has their own motivation for being one or the other, and that's what makes this conflict so compelling and what makes characters like Apple so intriguing. And something that I don't see mentioned very often is that Apple, to some degree, was perfectly justified in her fears. Eventually, assayed by the fact that the world is more complicated than she originally thought, she allowed Raven to magically destroy the Storybook of Legends, a very important object in EAH lore. Essentially, it is the book that students would sign their names in to officially pledge and become binded to their destinies, and it was Raven's refusal to sign that kicked off the plot events of the series. Anyways, Raven destroying the book gave everyone the ability to choose their destiny, be it following it exactly or choosing another path. And for a short while, it seemed that the conflict was resolved. But it wouldn't be so simple. Most students were safe despite the fears that they would all disappear, but fairies, not so much. The character Farrah Goodfairy is the daughter of the fairy godmother, and in the diary that comes with her doll, she writes about the fact that fairies are disappearing due to students not following their destinies. This already happened to the blue-haired fairy from Pinocchio's story. Because her story wasn't going to play out, she disappeared. Effectively, she died. And due to Ashlyn, the future Cinderella, being in love with someone not destined to be her future prince, Farrah is at risk of disappearing as well, and she's only able to save herself thanks to fabricating a loophole. So, due to Raven's actions, people are dying. And that's not to say Apple was right, just to say she wasn't entirely wrong. In addition to that, we also see that this newfound freedom isn't satisfying for Apple. She still wants her happily ever after, and in the film Dragon Games, again, she finds herself involved in another scheme to force Raven to follow in her mother's footsteps, this time organized by the evil queen herself. This film probably features Apple at her lowest, overtaken by her own ambition and desire for a happy ending.
I am not afraid. I will do whatever it takes, and I am like my mother, and my destiny is mine!
Again, this is not a defense of Apple to say that she's a perfect person, but to say that her flaws are part of what make her so compelling. Her reaction in this way is realistic. It makes complete sense that she wouldn't just immediately accept this new world, that she would revert to her old fears and anxieties, even if they're irrational. And she admits this too. This film also features some of the best character development for Apple. She acknowledges that she's been selfish. She apologizes.
I was selfish.
Go on.
Your mom hasn't changed. I had. And now I want to change again. For the better. For good. I know I can't turn back the pages, but I believe we can all have our happily ever afters.
And in a move extremely radical for her, she vows to find a happy ending on her own terms.
You don't have a choice.
Yes, I do. We
what's interesting about Apple's development as a character is that the more we learn about her, the more it's implied that this original happy ending she's always been.
I think I'm gonna end it here. Jesus. I need to go to bed. It is past my bedtime. Oh my god. I didn't even see that people were typing in chat. I'm such a bad streamer.